this mandate and this majority, we will at last be able to do what?
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson savours decisive win in election as the EU urges him to make a quick Brexit deal. Niger pays tribute to 71 soldiers killed by militants amid calls for support against terror groups. And Libya's UN-backed Prime Minister dismisses LNA commander's call to his forces to storm Tripoli. This is CGTN. Welcome to Africa Live with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. We'll bring you the details on those stories shortly, but first, Rama Nyang with the day's business headlines. Rama.
That's right, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. European Union leaders break a deadlock and claim a deal for 2050 carbon neutrality target. And the South African president holds an emergency cabinet meeting over Eskom as he promises to end load shedding. But can he deliver? We'll have details on those stories and lots more in the course of the hour. For now, though, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Beatrice.
Rama, thank you. And let's begin in the United Kingdom, where Prime Minister Boris Johnson's Conservative Party has won a sweeping victory in the general election. The Conservatives have secured a majority in the House of Commons against the Labour Party. The win now paves the way for Brexit to take place at the end of January. Let's take a look.
Leaving the Queen and beginning another stint as PM, Boris Johnson is back in power and with bigger numbers.
I frankly urge everyone on either side of what are, after 3.5 years, after all, an increasingly arid argument. I urge everyone to find closure and to let the healing begin.
That had been his pre-election promise. It is now his post-election reality. Boris Johnson has the numbers. He is going to get Brexit done.
We in this one nation Conservative government will never ignore your good and positive feelings of warmth and sympathy towards the other nations of Europe. Because now is the moment, precisely as we leave the EU, to let those natural feelings find renewed expression in building a new partnership, which is one of the great projects for next year.
Our exit poll is suggesting that there will be a Conservative majority.
It was the nightmare before Christmas for the Labour Party. The exit poll coming out seconds after ballots closed put the Prime Minister's party on course for a massive majority, better than expected, looking like the best result for them in 30 years. The opposition Labour Party, led by Jeremy Corbyn, facing massive losses, the worst result for them since the 1930s. Mr Corbyn now on the way out.
I will stay here until there has been somebody elected to succeed me, and then I will step down at that point.
And Mr Johnson will now have another 5 years. Getting Brexit done was always his goal, but an issue that frustrated him because Parliament blocked him again and again. It won't anymore. The Conservatives taking seats they have never won before from Labour, seats that would never normally vote Conservative. But the Brexit promise changed all of that.
I'm going to be on that train on Monday. I'm going to London. We're going to get Brexit done.
Anti-Brexit third party, the Liberal Democrats, had a huge shock. Their leader, Jo Swinson, who campaigned to scrap the withdrawal altogether, saw more than just party losses. She was kicked out of her own seat by a tiny margin, just 149 votes, leaving them without a leader. This is Nicola Sturgeon finding out it was her SNP party that kicked Swinson out. She unseated a lot of MPs in Scotland, taking all but 2 of the country's seats, saying it now gives her a powerful mandate to demand a second Scottish independence referendum, since Scotland does not want to leave Europe.
The stunning election win last night for the SNP renews, reinforces and strengthens the mandate we have from previous elections to offer the people of Scotland a choice over their future.
But with Mr Johnson's majority, she faces a big fight. Away from Parliament, reaction was swift. A good night for the pound, surging to a 19-month high against the dollar. It has been high for days, with pre-election polls suggesting a Conservative majority. meaning an orderly Brexit next month, the best the markets could hope for. And speaking of the dollar, a man who has lots of them, President Trump. No election complete without his thoughts. The embattled US leader, a fan of Boris Johnson, tweeting, "Congratulations to Boris Johnson on his great win. Britain and the United States will now be free to strike a massive new trade deal after Brexit. This deal has the potential to be far bigger and more lucrative than any deal that could be made with the EU. Celebrate Boris." And so expect lots more talk of deals now. MPs are going to be back in that building early next week. Boris Johnson says they're going to get to work immediately. Barring any last-minute surprises, Brexit now will go ahead next month on January 31st, just as he always wanted. Difference is now he's got the numbers, he's got the majority. He can do it his way. Phil Lavelle, CGTN in London.
A decisive win indeed for Boris Johnson. Let's get more now from Nicole Johnson. She's joining us live from London. Nicole, EU leaders are already calling on Boris Johnson to ensure a quick divorce. What different approach do we expect from the Prime Minister, and why the hurry?
Well, first of all, EU leaders have been calling for a quick divorce for a very long time. 3 years on, they haven't managed to get it. But now it seems as though Boris Johnson will be able to deliver on that. Legislation should be presented to Parliament next week. By the end of January, the UK should be out of the European Union. But there is a lot more to go than just that. And while we've spent the last month or so hearing about get Brexit done, that isn't the end of it. The UK needs to come up with a trade deal with the European Union by the end of next year. That's a very short time frame. And most analysts are saying that the UK won't be able to get it done in that time. It could take 6 or 7 years, in which case the UK would need to ask for an extension on that in the middle of summer. So there's still a long way to go. As we just heard, this has cleared the way for Boris Johnson to begin that process. He won't have to try to make deals with groups like the Northern Ireland Unionists. He's got the majority, he's got the mandate. That's what he's been after, and now he's free to go ahead, but it's not the end of the process.
Well, Nicole, this has been the best result for the Conservatives in 30 years. So how is the Labour Party taking this defeat in the election, and what's the political future of Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, as you can imagine, the Labour Party hasn't taken it very well at all. It's an absolute trouncing for them. They have lost seat after seat in Labour heartland, in the Midlands, in northern parts of the country, in Wales. I mean, this is really the centre of the Labour Party ordinarily. These are former mining areas, manufacturing areas, and seat after seat went to the Conservatives. And when you hear analysts talk about it, they talk about the red wall crumbling. So it's a terrible result for Labour. It's something that could take them 5 or 10 years, even longer, to try and come back from. And the comments, even within the party, towards their current leader, Jeremy Corbyn, have been brutal. They've blamed Corbyn, they've blamed the manifesto, they've blamed Brexit, they've blamed everything. Jeremy Corbyn has said that he will resign. He's staying on at the moment until there's a new leader, and he says that there'll be a period of reflection in the party, but it could be a long period of reflection.
Right, Nicole Johnson joining us there from London. Now, while Boris Johnson was securing his victory in the United Kingdom, EU leaders were attending a Brussels summit minus the UK Prime Minister. The leaders say they now want a quick divorce deal. They also want to move on to trade talks between the UK and the European Union, even if they prove difficult. The EU says it's ready to negotiate a free trade agreement, but many in the EU fear that Britain might try to reinvent itself as a low regulation rival. EU officials warn that Johnson's plan to diverge from EU rules could make negotiations even more complicated. EU trade pacts with countries such as South Korea, Japan and Canada have taken between 5 and 9 years to complete. Meanwhile, EU leaders have been congratulating Boris Johnson on his election triumph.
It's obviously a giant success for Boris Johnson. He's a charismatic leader. He won, and now they will leave, unfortunately. that is bad news for Europe.
I'm keen to work very hard with Prime Minister Johnson on getting the Executive and Assembly up and running again in Northern Ireland. I think that's absolutely crucial now and has to be a key priority for the next couple of weeks. And then we go on to the next phase of Brexit, which is negotiating a mighty new future economic partnership between the EU and the UK, and I think that can be done.
I have to tell you that I really appreciate him as a person. I do not always share the same political views, but that's the principle of being in different parties. But we had a good discussion in Luxembourg, but we were not able to present them to the press. But I appreciate the person, and we had good discussions, and I'm convinced that we'll be able also to be still partners for the future.
Londoners have been reacting to the Conservative Party's sweeping victory in the UK snap general election. They also had plenty to say on where this leaves the country on Brexit. Let's take a look.
I don't think anyone thought it would be this big. I guess the one silver lining is that it establishes real clarity. There is a clear result. The way forward is much more defined now and easy to see. It might not be the one all of us would like to go on, frankly, but it does remove some uncertainty, I hope.
So I think the country will be significantly worse off out of Europe, and I think it will be significantly worse off with a Tory government who clearly don't care about the NHS, about social care, all the things that people who are the most vulnerable are really going to suffer for. I don't think they care. I think they say what they need it to say to get into power, and it's a disaster.
Jeremy Corbyn comes across as quite a negative person, and you don't want a negative leader. You want to be represented by someone who's very positive, you know, quite enthusiastic about everything, and no matter what, just like going for a positive result. Labour, I mean, Jeremy Corbyn is stepping down as well. I think it's a fair point. He should have stepped down a couple of years ago.
To me, it's been a campaign based on lies and untruths and just statements that could never be fulfilled by either party, and now to see an overwhelming majority given to someone who I don't think is trustworthy, it's kind of disappointing.
In Washington, D.C., the Judiciary Committee of the U.S. House of Representatives has voted along party lines to approve 2 articles of impeachment against Donald Trump, charging the president with abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. A historic vote is set for next week in the full House that could make President Trump the 3rd president in U.S. history to be impeached. Democrats who control the House accuse the president of betraying the public trust by withholding $391 million in military aid to pressure Ukraine's president to announce an investigation of former Vice President Joe Biden, one of Trump's top political rivals. Well, let's get more now from our reporter Giles Gibson, who is live for us in Washington. Do explain to us, though, Giles, what this vote today means for Trump and what's the president's reaction to this development?
Yeah, it only took about 10 minutes for the members of the House Judiciary Committee to pass these 2 articles of impeachment along party lines pretty much exclusively. The 2 articles being abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. Now, these articles will now leave the House Judiciary Committee and go to a full vote in the House of Representatives that we're expecting at some point in the next few days, sort of early next week. Now, in terms of President Trump's reaction, we have heard from him speaking at the White House just a few moments ago. He described this vote as a sham, and he also accused the Democrats of trivializing impeachment.
So he has accused the Democrats of trivializing the impeachment. So take us through, though, what we can expect when the vote comes to the floor next week and what we can expect at the Senate later on.
Well, covering this impeachment process at times is a bit like reading a book that you already know the ending to. As I was saying, the House of Representatives will vote on these articles of impeachment at some point next week. We are almost 100% sure that the Democrat-controlled House will pass those articles of impeachment, and that's when the process moves up to the Senate and we have what's known as a trial in the US Senate. We heard on Thursday from the top Republican in the Senate, Senator Mitch McConnell, speaking to Fox News. He said that there is no chance President Trump will be removed, and he also said that there is a weak case coming from the House, from the Democrats in the House in terms of impeaching President Trump. So it's looking very likely that these articles of impeachment will pass in the House of Representatives next week and then fail when they go to the Republican-controlled Senate, most likely at the start of next year.
Giles Gibson joining us there from Washington, D.C. Thank you. Let's take a look now at other stories we're following for you this hour. Niger has paid tribute to the 71 soldiers who were killed by Islamist militants linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIL earlier this week. The burial took place on Friday. The attack took place on a remote military camp in Niger near the border with Mali. According to an army spokesman, this is the deadliest raid against the Nigerian military. Nigerian President Mahamadou Issoufou has declared a 3-day national mourning in remembrance of the fallen soldiers. Jihadists have mounted increasingly lethal attacks across West Africa's Sahel region this year. And in Libya, the Eastern Commander Khalifa Haftar has once again urged his forces to advance towards central Tripoli. This time, he says, it will be the final battle for the capital. But Libya's internationally recognized Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj has urged citizens not to feel threatened by Khalifa Haftar. CGTN's Daniela Pearson reports.
General Khalifa Haftar heads the self-styled Libyan National Army. Since April, the Eastern Base commander has been trying to take control of the capital Tripoli, which lies to the west of Libya.
We announced the decisive battle and the advancement towards the heart of the capital to set it free, in order to break its chains, free its hostages, spreading happiness and joy to the hearts of its people. Tripoli will return to the historical light it once was, becoming a capital of culture. We will raise a flag of victory towards its squares, closing the pages of injustice, misery and defeat. With victory, we announce the birth of a new era. So advance now, advance now, advance our heroes.
Forces loyal to Haftar often issue announcements of advances, but they've been followed by little concrete change on the battlefield. Libya's internationally recognized Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj has dismissed Haftar's statement. Sarraj says that Haftar's forces have not advanced towards the capital.
Dear free citizens, do not believe the lies of those who have deluded their words and rumors. There is no 0 hour, but only delusions, and there is neither control nor any storming of Tripoli and its neighborhoods.
The Tripoli Prime Minister even said that peace talks had been scheduled.
We were all on the verge of meeting for talks together in mid-April in Ghadames to discuss a future that unifies us and about dreams that we all share of a nation filled with peace, stability, safety and security.
The battle for Tripoli has been raging for the best part of the year now. On one side, the Tripoli government is internationally recognized and backed by the United Nations. On the other side, Haftar's forces are supported by Egypt and the UAE. But foreign backing has brought the fight to a stalemate. Neither side has yet to gain enough support for a decisive advantage. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. Hope for progress as South Sudan's President Salva Kiir and opposition leader Machar attend a ministers' council meeting together. And Ethiopians join their prime minister in celebrating the Nobel Peace Prize.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The Egyptian armed forces have released footage of recent naval drills in the Mediterranean Sea. Analysts consider it an indirect response from Cairo to a recent maritime border deal between Turkey and Libya. The controversial agreement has fueled tensions over oil and gas drilling right in the Mediterranean. Egypt is backing its allies, Greece and Cyprus, which say the deal goes against international law.
The Egyptian naval forces display its might. It has released a video showcasing its Mistral helicopter carrier in action with some of its latest Navy vessels. Released this week, the video statement includes rare scenes of a Harpoon missiles fired from one of Egypt's newly purchased submarines.
It is not usual to see an announcement for an individual Egyptian exercise. It is quite remarkable because it has displayed the magnitude of the development of the Egyptian Navy. Egypt now has a complete variety of Navy units which complement each other for the great defensive and offensive power.
It's a presentation of Egypt's various naval combating capabilities. The military statement stressed on the range of its submarine missiles, which could reach more than 130 kilometers. Cairo stressed that these drills are designed to secure Egypt's economic interests in the sea, in reference to its latest natural gas discoveries.
This drill is a clear response for all foreign foes to Egypt, that Egypt's army and the navy especially are capable of protecting the nation's interests in the Mediterranean. Turkey's agreement with Libya threatens Egypt's national security and its program to expand the gas exploration in the Mediterranean. I think the timing of this Navy message is intentional.
This video follows rejection from the East Mediterranean Gas Alliance to a Turkish-Libyan agreement over water borders, which interrupts a joint project to export natural gas from Egypt to Europe through Cyprus and Greece.
Egypt's display of naval power appears to be part of a statement's war as tension rises in the Mediterranean. A Libyan Eastern commander says he was ordered by General Khalifa Haftar to sink Turkish ships if they breach the Libyan borders, while President Erdogan says he's willing to send troops to Libya to fight against the Egyptian-backed LNA offensive against the capital Tripoli. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, from the Mediterranean coastal city Al Alamein, Egypt.
South Sudan's government says ongoing meetings between President Salva Kiir and opposition leader Riek Machar are making progress towards resolving outstanding issues in the peace process. The two leaders on Friday attended South Sudan's weekly Council of Ministers meeting together in Juba. CGTN's Patrick Oyet brings us more on this story.
South Sudan's government says the discussion between President Salva Kiir and designated Vice President Riek Machar on Friday focused on speeding up security sector reforms.
There is the issue of supplies, which have also been agreement reached that food, medicine and fuel need to be purchased quickly in order for these mechanisms to be able to do their job.
The government says the East African Regional Body, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development or IGAD, is ready to start joint training of government and opposition armed forces next week. It is planned that after the training, the joint forces would be deployed in places such as Juba to provide security to pave the way for formation of a unity government. Opposition group led by Riek Machar says there is renewed energy in the peace process.
We all know there are situations here and there that has to be overcome. And I believe by working together, discussing and meeting, we will be able to overcome those challenges.
President Salva Kiir and Riek Machar are expected to meet again on Saturday. The talks will focus on the issue of the number of states and their boundaries. Patrick Koyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
And staying in South Sudan, heavy rains in the country has triggered flooding. Over 78 people have died in Boma State, located in the greater Upper Nile region. CGTN's Ashtatal has more.
Homes submerged, crops destroyed, and boreholes contaminated. Residents of Pibor, located in Boma State, are facing these challenges following unexpected heavy rains.
The whole town of Boma State is really covered with water. A lot of humanitarian private assets have been destroyed, and the situation is helpless up to now.
For now, residents seek shelter outside the governor's office. Humanitarian agencies need to meet immediate and future needs.
Well, at the moment, obviously, it's a pure emergency. It's plastic sheets. It's what we call WASH, the water and sanitation issues. As people start to go back, they're going to need to go back with something. They've lost a lot of their belongings, but also food. The long-term impact of this is that the crops have been destroyed now by the floods, and there'll be food shortages further down the line, so we have to make sure that we stand up and meet those as well.
Pibor has also been dealing with establishing a fragile peace. Governors have been traveling between communities for reconciliation talks. The flooded roads mean those talks will have to be put on hold.
To make the peace, we need the movement. So the use of this area to move to other locations so that they will discuss about how to make the peace. Then other youth from other tribes, they may come here so that we can share information and we stop the violence.
For now, locals say they're committed to rebuilding their lives and continued peace. Asatal, CGTN.
The chairman of the Algerian National Independent Authority for Elections has announced that former Prime Minister Abdelmadjid Tebboune has won the country's presidential election. Tebboune obtained over 4,900,000 votes and thus secured 58.15% of the votes. Abdelkader Bengrina comes in second with 17.38%. Algeria's National Independent Authority for Elections also says that the overall voter turnout was only 39.83%, the lowest ever recorded in the country. Before his appointment as Algeria's Prime Minister in May of 2017, Abdelmadjid Tebboune served as the Interim Minister of Commerce.
The names according to the votes cast resulted in a descending order. It means classified from the one with the highest number of votes cast to the lowest number of votes. The initial results are: in first place, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, who obtained 4,945,166 votes cast for a total rate of 58.15%.
Ethiopia's Nobel Peace Prize-winning Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed received a hero's welcome upon his arrival in Addis Ababa from Oslo. Many Ethiopians came out on the streets of the capital and expressed their excitement. Here's CGTN's Girum Chala with more details.
Thousands came out on the streets to greet and congratulate Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. He's a Nobel Peace Prize winner for 2019, has given people a reason to display ultimate pride and joy.
This is incredible. We have never had such a proud moment in our generation's lifetime. Ethiopia, Africa, and even the entire world has been pleasantly touched by this prize.
Abiy's win will give us strength and courage. It will also help us to be motivated for peace, love, and unity.
After his arrival from Oslo and at Bole International Airport, the Nobel laureate Abiy Ahmed told journalists his prize has a countrywide, regional and continental significance.
Today, for the people of Ethiopia and Eritrea, as well as the people of East Africa and the entire continent, have gotten the most important global attention and recognition. I have availed myself on behalf of all the people of Ethiopia, Eritrea, and the East African region, and have tried to shift the old image into a new dynamic image about us. I have told the world that these areas can also make history happen.
Abiy Ahmed said the Nobel Peace Prize can also be used as a huge opportunity to capitalize on.
The prize for Ethiopia and Eritrea, for President Isaias and myself, as well as for the friends of our two countries, should see it as a great opportunity. We have to use this opportunity to solve our other problems too.
The historic achievement of Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, of him winning the Nobel Peace Prize, is assumed to be one of the most important legacies of his leadership to Ethiopia. People still expect this leader to deliver more on other sectors too, such as economic development, healthcare provision, and education, among others. Group Dala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
And let's head over to Nigeria, where one official from the House of Representatives has been speaking out against the Xinjiang-related bill passed in the U.S. The head of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Buba Yakub, said the U.S. should not use legislation to interfere in China's internal affairs. Yakub says that Xinjiang has achieved good results in de-extremism through education. Others say that the bill passed last week will encourage the spread of terrorism in China's Xinjiang region.
Independent countries or sovereign countries to be allowed to handle internal issues on their own. I strongly believe that the sovereign countries should not be dictated in the way they handle their affairs in their countries. And so I don't know why that bill was passed. China have been using education, they have been using the press, information, dissemination to get the people educated so that they will go away from their extremist thinking. I think in Nigeria we are also doing the same thing. It is 3 years now, there is no incidence of killings or extremism. So that means the system of education or the system that is used there is working. So if the system is working and the people are not killing each other, I think it's good.
Well, Ramanyang is here now with the latest in business news. Rama.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in business. EU leaders break a deadlock and claim a deal for a 2050 carbon neutrality target. And the South African president has held an emergency meeting over Eskom as he promises to end load shedding.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
European Union leaders have agreed to a deal that aims to make the continent carbon neutral by 2050. But one member state is still holding out. That's Poland. It failed to commit to the deal, which aims to raise at least $111 billion to help EU states that are heavily reliant on fossil fuels to make the transition to other energy sources with a lot lower emissions, like natural gas, for instance. Poland wants to wait until 2070 to go carbon neutral, since 80% of its power comes from coal-fired power plants. The EU says it will hold a special meeting with leaders in Poland next June. At the same time, a fresh UN report argues that tourism has contributed significantly to global warming. The UN's World Tourism Organization released a report on the subject on the sidelines of the ongoing 2019 UN Climate Change Conference, COP25, in Madrid. The report says that tourism-related emissions accounted for 22% of all transport-related emissions in 2016, and that trend is likely to continue, the report says, all the way to 2030. South Africa's president, in the meantime, says there will be no load shedding in the country from next week, Tuesday. He held an emergency cabinet meeting on the 13th of December to try and resolve a brutal power crisis that has twice triggered a contraction in economic output this year. The country, as we speak, is losing over $90 million a day as a direct result of these ongoing power cuts. Here's CGTN's Sumitra Naidu now, exploring where South Africa could get alternative energy supplies and at what cost.
It's day 8 for load shedding in South Africa. The frequency of power cuts has been reduced down to stage 2, but the national grid remains under pressure.
They have an aging coal fleet of power stations that are in excess of 30 to almost 50 years old. Those coal-fired power stations, they were not maintained adequately. Therefore, they are incurring unplanned breakdowns. The third issue is that in terms of the Medupi and Kusila power stations, there are supply issues that they're experiencing with regards to the coal that needs to go into the plants. And there are also design flaws in terms of the construction.
Now that the problem is so dire, many are hoping the government will look at alternative energy sources.
The embedded generation, like rooftop solar PV plants, present huge opportunities in South Africa. We already have a lot of facilities. For example, our own campus here on the CSIR, we already supply a substantial portion of our electricity needs from our own local rooftop solar PV plants. And many shopping malls and centres, schools, clinics are following suit. And that's a huge market potential in South Africa because we have excellent sunshine all year round.
There are a number of energy alternatives that can be implemented and should have been implemented years ago. But Eskom has consistently delayed these projects and in some cases blocked them completely.
The first option is to explore immediate power purchase agreements with independent power producers. They're going to look at issuing an RFI to procure 5,000 megawatts. The second option is to accelerate the renewable power producers from around 4.5 to ensure that they meet their operating dates earlier than expected so we can get more power onto the grid. And the last option is to accelerate what they call the gas to power program, and that is to import gas from areas like Mozambique and use that gas to generate electricity.
An announcement is expected in Parliament Friday. It's not clear whether it will be related to a plan for Eskom or an alternative solution to fix the energy crisis. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, for those of you whose travel plans particularly focus on South Africa, this next story is for you. Authorities are there plan to significantly cut crimes committed against tourists during the festive season. Tourism industry players are rolling out a 6-month pilot program that's designed to address tourists' safety concerns. CGTN's Yolita Njamela explains.
Crime is known to substantially increase over the festive season here in South Africa, and tourism is affected as would-be holiday makers often refrain from making their way here. And South Africa wants to change that scenario to ensure that locals and tourists enjoy the festive season without having to constantly look over their shoulders.
We have crafted a workable tourism safety plan integrating a proactive preventative measure to potential incidents, responsive measures that will ensure quick and effective operational responses, and most importantly, an aftercare program that focuses on measures to facilitate and provide victim support after an incident has occurred. And the pilot interventions will include bringing in private security to work under the police in areas where interventions is necessary and is needed.
A special stabilization plan has already been implemented to identify all potential hotspots areas. Some more measures include a rapid response task team for tourists and establishing a reserve police force focusing on tourists. The police believe that it's simply not enough to react to crimes already committed, as it puts the country in a bad light.
We've assembled a task team that will specifically look into an immediate response on the investigation of such cases before tourists may return to their countries or to their destinations as far as we can. To have dealt with that particular case, we have got an integrated strategy with prosecution, and what we are arranging together with them is a dedicated prosecution to this particular aspect.
The measures that have thus far been already implemented seem to be working.
You would remember that Gauteng at one time gave us a lot of problem, especially with the follow-ups, criminals following people, including tourists from the airport. We created a special unit to investigate and follow those up, and the results are quite good in terms of reduction of those incidents. Maybe to give the figures is that, for instance, in January we had 26 of those, February 8, March 8, April we were 0, May 2, June 1, July 3, August 4, September 0, October 1, November we had about 7 of them.
Police intend on keeping these measures on the ground beyond the festive season to ensure that tourists feel free coming to the country and contributing towards the economy. Beatrice Marshall for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
One last story for you. Uganda's tested its first all-electric bus, and authorities in the capital, Kampala, could take it up as a means of mass, clean, carbon-free public transport. CGTN's Leon Sanyange was on board for a shakedown of the 90-seater vehicle.
The mega switch from diesel engines to an electric-powered ride. This is Uganda's Kayola electric bus.
It's a low-flow entry city bus. Low flow meaning somebody can just jump on, hop off without needing stairs.
Spacious inside, equipped with security cameras and screens, the bus seems comfortable. It can carry up to 90 people and cover a distance of 300 kilometers with a single charge of electric power. The bus is out on yet another road trip, and this could be the longest so far, a 130-kilometer journey from the capital to the central part of the country. Several road tests have already been done to guarantee it is roadworthy. Officials say this will be a big step in the city's plans to go green.
We will actually undertake a 12-month study with the 2 buses that we will have built to best understand in what way can we introduce electric buses to urban centers in Uganda and beyond in the sub-Saharan region.
City residents can expect to start riding on the buses by 2021. The allure of riding a bus already has some excited.
It has been my dream. I've heard of Kira Motors, but I've not I haven't got an opportunity to walk into it and board it. You understand? So it's something that I cannot wait for it.
The Ugandan car company Kira Motors Corporation plans on assembling many more. Leon Sanyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
I'll be there for the time being. Later on at the top of the hour, we'll be back in South Africa looking at that country's power crisis. The country's president has met the cabinet in an emergency meeting over this particular crisis. So what solutions are coming out of that? We'll have the latest for you live from Johannesburg at 1800 GMT. See you then. For now, back to Beatrice.
Rama, thank you. And we still have more news for you here on Current Affairs. Here's what's ahead. Cuban music thrives in the bars of Ouagadougou.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore.
CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
To Burkina Faso now. In the country's capital, Ouagadougou, many bars book Cuban-style bands to play the hits of the legendary Buena Vista Social Club. CGTN's Ashtatal has more.
They are keeping the music of the legendary Buena Vista Social Club alive. This group, the Faso Elites, frequents most bars in the capital of Burkina Faso, Ouagadougou.
Burkinabe people like Cuban music. It takes us back to the old days, the time of our parents and our old president Thomas Sankara. May he rest in peace. He really loved Cuban tunes.
Most of the patrons may be over 60, but they still know how to break it down on the dance floor. The popularity of Cuban music goes back to the days of President Thomas Sankara.
Cuba was a revolutionary country, and at the time there was a partnership between Burkina Faso and Cuba. There were Cubans who came over here, bringing Cuban groups with them, like the Orchestra Aragon. They came here.
Sankara was a musician himself before becoming president. Both his politics and music were inspired by his revolutionary Cuban contemporaries.
The tunes we played with him were written by Nonas Pedro and others. There were some Cuban pieces that we wrote here, mixing them together. We were good at Congolese music, Cuban mandinke, and Guinean tunes.
Music links the world and transcends generations. With their music, the Faso Elites seek to continue to bring the world together with their special mix of music and politics. Astatal, CGTN.
Patients and staff at the Red Cross War Memorial Children's Hospital in Cape Town, South Africa, were in a celebratory mood when Santa Claus came to make his rounds. The hospital held its annual Christmas parade, which it has done for the past 2 decades. Renee Delcam has more.
There was plenty of joy and excitement as Christmas came early for the kids at the Red Cross War Memorial Children's Hospital. Santa Claus arrived in style, while his helpers danced their way through the hospital grounds. The Red Cross Children's Hospital Christmas Parade has over the years become part of the proud tradition of this world-class hospital, one of the few dedicated pediatric hospitals in sub-Saharan Africa.
We are a tertiary academic hospital, so we do receive referrals from all over the world because there are certain things that we specialize in, and because we're a training hospital, we're always on the forefront of new developments. So we really try and provide that service not only for South Africa but also as a leader for the rest of Africa.
And after a long, challenging year for many of the young patients, everyone is keen to give them a reason to smile.
So we bring out clowns, we bring out Father Christmas, we bring out the fire department, the traffic officers, just to create a vibe around the hospital environment. Because when children come here, they are anxious. They don't want to be here. Children want to play. And we, as the Friends of the Children's Hospital Association, do our part to create that environment for the children.
It's lovely to bring some festive cheer to the children. There are many of our kids or patients in the hospital who are in bed, who cannot come outside. So what we try and do is, if there are children who can come outside, they'll be assisted to come outside. But the reason that we have it here in the front of the hospital is so that some of the children can come to the windows at the wards on the different levels of the building and come and see what's going on, but also hear. We were not allowed to film inside the hospital wards because most kids here are suffering from serious medical conditions. But Santa and his helpers also took gifts and sweets to the young patients in their hospital beds to help spread a bit of festive cheer.
Especially for those that is here for a long time and those who just arrived.
We've got lots of children here that's got special sickness and stuff that we're just going to bring a little bit of joy and a smile on each and everyone's face today. Have a glorious holiday.
Renat Al-Kam, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
And we still have more news for you here on the program. Your sports news coming up right after this.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Cricket South Africa's acting CEO, Dr. Jack Fowle, has announced the appointment of former national captain Graham Smith as the country's interim director of cricket. The short-term deal will see Smith assist with the professional cricket arm as well as the talent pipeline for the next 12 weeks. Here's CGTN's Du Plessis with more.
The former opening batsman will have his work cut out for the next 12 weeks before heading to the Indian Premier League to take up a coaching role for the duration of the lucrative tournament. The 116 Test veteran said he was looking forward to assisting CSA and developing the new role of Director of Cricket, and that his objective was to make a positive impact. But he admitted there was a ton of work to be done as the much-anticipated series against England gets underway on December 26th at Supersport Park in Centurion, with Enoch Inkwe set to continue in a part-time team director role for the series against the ODI World Champions. Smith will get to work straight away by looking at how he can take the sport forward, beginning with mending the relationship between the South African Cricketers Association and his new employers. Because as it stands, SACA still want the entire CSA board to resign, and funnily enough, it was one of Smith's demands when he began negotiating terms for the role 15 weeks ago, only to do a U-turn in the cricket's dire situation. That said, the 38-year-old is a successful leader and will demand that everyone toes the line in a bid to stabilize a sinking ship. The public, former players and media have all reacted positively to the news, but now it's a case of all hands on deck as CSA attempts to plot a course in a new direction. CS Du Plessis, CGTN, Johannesburg.
In football, Saudi's side Al Hilal continued their preparations ahead of facing African giants Espérance Sportif de Tunis in the 2019 FIFA Club World Cup quarterfinals. The Asian Champions League winners Al Hilal were the last to arrive in Qatar for the tournament and will play the four-time African champions on Saturday. Al Hilal qualified for the Club World Cup following their 3-0 win over Urawa Reds of Japan in the AFC Champions League final. Espérance were crowned Continental Cup winners after they were awarded their abandoned second leg CAF Champions League final against Wydad Casablanca of Morocco. Now, the English Premier League resumes on Saturday with log leaders Liverpool in the early kick-off against basement side Watford. The Reds are out to maintain their 8-point gap at the top ahead of the busy festive period where they will head to the Club World Cup in Qatar next week. The highlight fixture of the weekend sees Arsenal host champions Manchester City at the Emirates on Sunday. City cross-town rivals Manchester United are at home to Everton also on Sunday, with manager Ole Gunnar confident his team is improving on the back of 2 successive league wins